Greetings. In this month's Micah Connect gathering, I'm in conversation with Dr. Manoj Kurian, who is the coordinator of the Ecumenical Advocacy Alliance of the World Council of Churches. I met Manoj through our collaboration on the Pray and Act Against Hunger campaign, and also Manoj was a speaker at our global consultation last year. Welcome, Manoj. It's a real pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you so much. I really value this opportunity deeply.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know you, won't you just introduce yourself, your role at the WCC, and also I think if you can also give us just a little snapshot of the World Council of Churches. I know that's a big ask, but so we can also grow our knowledge in that regard.
Absolutely. My name is Manoj Kurian, and I'm a Malaysian of Indian ancestry. My ancestors are from South India, and Malaysia is a multi-ethnic country. And I was sent to. My father was a plantation manager of oil palm estates, and I was sent to India when I was young to boarding schools. And while I studied as a foreign student, I related with people in India. And when I became a practicing Christian in my medical school, I decided to work as a missionary doctor in India, where I worked for 10 years, and following which I had to leave India, and I got this job in the World Council of Churches, where I worked for many years, with a break in between, where I worked for International Aid Society. So I'm trained in public health, and I coordinate the WCC's Ecumenical Advocacy Alliance, which has two campaigns, the Food for Life campaign and HIV. I'm also coordinating the ecologically economic justice work of WCC. When we look at WCC, the World Council of Churches, is an association of churches. It's a broad spectrum of around more than 350 member churches all over the world, in 150 odd countries and territories. It's formed. It's the motivation of it is the prayer of Jesus in Gethsemane, when he prayed for himself before being betrayed and crucified. He prayed for himself, but he also prayed for his followers. That he prayed that that they would be one, so that the world may believe. So it's unity, so that Jesus's message is believable. So, of course, we have a wide spectrum of member churches. It has got represent about 600 million people. Around a billion people are Catholics, and then you have also many churches that are not members. We do have a spectrum of membership from Orthodox to Anglican, Lutheran, Methodist, Pentecostal, Evangelical. It's a big spread. There are a significant number, around 400 million Christians who are not members. But the three areas is one, our work is on faith and order. That is about faith. So if you are a Christian, why are you a Christian? So, about faith, about identity, what brings us together, what brings us apart, because the member churches are quite diverse. Though, of course, there is an inclusion criteria which says that, all members should believe that Jesus is the Son of God and the Trinitarian perspective. So there are some inclusion criteria. Then the other perspective, or the facet of work is, if we are Christian, what do we do and speak? So this is the public witness and diaconia. It's under that department. And the third is about, if we are Christians, how do we communicate our message? How do we educate? So this is world mission and evangelism, and also education. So there are three facets, roughly, of the WCC work, but it's an association, and we are not doing all the work, but we are just a kind of a hub where we try to connect up, just like Micah Connect is. So this is the general description, and I really look forward to working, with Micah Global, because we are followers of Jesus. So when I used to work in India and in Asia, I used to say, when we persecuted, or when our churches are burnt, they don't look at the denominations, and be marked by following Jesus. And that's the most important thing. And that is the unity that we need, not on denominational perspective, but really who are we following? And is that path that we take, does that mark the world? This is so important that we collaborate.
Sure, Manoj, listening to you, it's so exciting, all the different aspects of the WCC. I know in my own theological studies, I enjoyed and benefited from many of the publications that are put out by the WCC, and also even hearing about your own early life as a missionary doctor. I'm sure at another time you could tell us many stories about that period of your life. So thank you for sharing with us about yourself and about the WCC. As we know, the topic that we're looking today at is the topic hunger. You know, that one word hunger, it doesn't need any explanation or qualification really for us to grasp it and to experience it. But I wonder if you could give us an overview of world hunger at this time, because it is really reaching or has reached crisis proportions. Can you give us a snapshot of that word hunger at this time?
You know, there are varying aspects of hunger. There's starvation, but there's also lack of food, that, you know, when you go to bed and you're still feeling hungry. So hunger, there's a spectrum of hunger, but it is it's a reality, and it's an ever, as you mentioned, Deborah, it's an ever growing reality, unfortunately. And in a situation, in a world where actually there is enough food for everybody, and it's getting worse. So in a way, the situation is that, you know, more than 1 in 9 people in the world, that's, you know, around 811 million people, when they are lying down to sleep in the evening, you know, in whatever condition, they're hungry. And the tragedy is that the people who are facing acute hunger are increasing. It has doubled. I mean, when you're talking about this is really, you know, serious hunger, not just malnutrition. It has doubled from 135 to around 276 million since 2019. And we are talking about just a couple of years. I mean, it's doubled. And about 44 million people in 38 countries are on the edge of famine. Famine is when there is catastrophic hunger, you know. And the tragedy is that, you know, we are not actually, when you say 1 in 9, we are not actually looking at the people who are being impacted by less food or less nourishing food, malnutrition. That is much higher. It's you know, out of the nearly 8 billion people, 2.4 billion people are suffering from malnutrition. So, you know, it reveals a lot of brokenness in this world. So when we say about this brokenness, we immediately brought to the Ukraine crisis of the war, which of course has made matters worse, but that is not the only issue. But that is important because around 12.8 million people within Ukraine, I mean, in Ukraine have been displaced within the country itself or outside. And of course, their food, they are a big important supplier. Russia and Ukraine are important suppliers of food, fertilizer, you know, food and fertilizer and oils, etc. So it is, and fuel. Oil, edible oil, and also fuel. So all this is contributing. But this displacement and conflict is huge all over the world. Never has been so many people in the world after the Second World War being displaced. There are 100 million people, that is 1 in 78 people in the world, is displaced, is not living where they're normally living. And this is due to various challenges, mostly conflict, but climate change, etc. So it is a huge challenge. So conflict is one. Then of course COVID-19 and pandemics. It has really battered our economies and supply chains, and it has also revealed the problems of globalized you know, agriculture, where we have stopped cultivating things and we just wait for it to buy it from the shop, and when it has to come from across continents, and you know, the fallacy and the danger of this. So COVID-19 is the other challenge. And then, of course, climate catastrophe. I mean, now I'm sitting in Geneva. The temperature is 30 degrees. In the neighboring France, in southern Europe, it is approaching 40 degrees. Forest fires burning across the Mediterranean. Tremendous challenges. And you look at Zimbabwe, or look at India, look at Southeast Asia, or Southern Africa, whichever country, whichever regions, El Nino, the climate changes are so palpable. I mean, the number of the droughts, frequency of droughts, natural phenomenon, catastrophes, tornadoes in the last 50 years, it has increased 5 times. Droughts and extreme weather conditions in your own condition, you can regions, you can just reflect yourself, because globally it is significantly increased. And then the other is also the challenge of costs and economies. So this is the other C. And what we say is that, where there is a globalized, food has become a commodity, and it is no longer in control. I mean, somehow we have given up our controls or our autonomy to the markets. So we don't cultivate our own cereals or millets or rye or barleys, which our ancestors eat, but we have come down to a few cereals like wheat, rice, and maize. Very unfortunate. And then we have lost the biodiversity, and we need to get down to the basics. So it's globally, we are in a very, very difficult situation, multiple crises. To recap: conflict, COVID and other pandemics, climate issues, and the costs and the market and supply chain, etc. So there are a lot of challenges that we face, but we should not be discouraged.
Sure. Thank you, Manoj, for painting the picture of hunger in the world today and its multifaceted causes. As Christians, as Christ followers, how personally, but also in churches and in our organizations, can we be responding? I was thinking as I was listening to you, Jesus saying to his disciples in front of the hungry people, will you feed them, presenting them with a seemingly impossible task? How can we be light in this situation?
Thank you, Deborah. And you have raised the critical aspect of what Jesus said, and when these thousands, of people were gathered in this remote place where they were seeking him out. This was the feeding of the multitudes. I mean, he was actually running away for some reflection after the beheading of John the Baptist, his own brother, in the sense, the one who baptized him, and he was martyred, and he was upset, and he went to a remote place. But people went after him. So it was not near any market. There was no food. He told his disciples, feed them. There were no excuses. I'm sure they tried. In fact, the Bible says they tried to give, it's going to be expensive. It's going to cost 6 months of salaries of a person. There are no markets. No, feed them. And even the last 3 questions he asked the commands he gives to Peter is to take care of sheep and feed. And so, caring for our people and making sure that they can live in dignity is fundamental. And, I think fundamentally we have to be sensitive and listening carefully, and be sensitive to the needs of people around us, and not wait for people to ask us for help. Most people who need don't ask. When people ask, when situation is so desperate, and and so most people don't ask. They just. That's why, in many of our cultures, when people come, they ask, have you eaten? How are you? So all the different languages, if you analyze through, our cultures, that's the first thing you ask. Have you eaten? Would you like something to eat? Are you all right? So it's so important that we are listening carefully. And unfortunately, I think with Industrial Revolution and with the wide availability of food, we are not even aware of hunger. And this is a problem, because, when you say bereavement, yes, some people die, and we experience bereavement and sadness, catastrophes, but we don't we are eating 3, 4, 5 times a day. So there is a role also for fasting and praying and listening. And then, so I think it's not enough to empathize, but what are we doing about it? How do we respond to the hunger? Not only in your, so for example, it's in the house, you ask, it starts at home, and we make some food. When you see the amount of food, do you think it's enough for everybody, or do I just go and finish everything? And in my house, we call it the snackcident. So it was a snackcident, I just finished everything off, snacked it off. So there cannot be any snackcidents at home. There should be justice at home, make sure that when mom comes, and she often is the last. And does mom have any food left? And so, and then also to see in the wider community, policy-wise, and etc., etc. So, in a way, we have developed something called the 10 Commandments of food. I can give you the web link, and 10 Commandments. It's a fascinating, where we have just identified 10 aspects. So, what we can do about it is this, broad. It's not just to give enumerate 10 principles, biblically based principles. The first is to give thanks to the food we eat. Every time, we need to thank God for the food. It's very important. Be sensitive to to what is made available, and to be grateful that we have food. The second is, I think, to try to eat food grown as close to you as possible. Very important, because there are a lot of farmers in our region, whose survival is important. So not just go buy the cheapest food, but rather try to buy food that is grown near you. It'll help the farmer around you, but also it helps, it doesn't waste energy, etc. The third is, we need to strive for all people to have knowledge about food and access to affordable, nutritious food. It's just not cheap food, but is it nourishing food, greens and poultry and even meats, etc. Is it available for people? And the fourth is to eat mindfully and in moderation. Where we need to, one of my friends when I was young told me there are 3 things, stop speaking when you still have something to speak, stop eating when you're still hungry, and then wake up when you're still feeling sleepy. So in a way, so in the sense, we need to stop. We cannot just wait for our stomach to be full, because we are not like our ancestors, where we get one meal and then we don't know when we are going to get the next meal. The fifth is not waste food, and this is so critical, because 70% of all fresh water available in this world is used for agriculture. 40% of all arable land is used for agriculture. A third of all global warming, the greenhouse gases that are emitted is because of food and food production. And so you can see the impact of all this. A third of global the greenhouse gas emissions, 70% of water, 40% of all land, and then a third of all this food that we produced is wasted. And it's unbelievable. It's partly also because of lack of infrastructure, but partly also because of lack of care. So that's very important. And then I think the sixth is that we have to be grateful for those who grow and prepare the food on the table. Are they being remunerated? Are they starving themselves? And of course, not only it might be the cook, it might be the people, like, in a meeting, you thank the interpreters, right? If you have different languages. So in the hotel, do you think about the hotel staff, or your own mother, or your father, or your brother or sister who's cooking? Then, of course, the seventh is to support fair wages for farm workers, farmers, food workers, fishermen. 8 is reduce environmental damage of water, the water, land, and air from food production. And the 9th is we need to protect biodiversity. Take care of what is there in your environment. Have green patches. Don't just think to control everything, that all lands into one crop. I'm saying this because I was brought up as educated because of palm oil plantations. And my father was a farmer, was a manager of a huge multinational plantation company, Harrison and Crossfield, and I was educated on the destruction of ecosystems and displacement of indigenous people. So, I'm not speaking from a pedestal. I'm speaking from a person who has benefited from the destruction of the world. So all of us are part of this mess. So we need to do things to protect the biodiversity. And of course, next is to rejoice and share the food that we are given. It's so important that we share the food. Suddenly it becomes much more enriching and much more valuable and much more appreciated when we share it. Yeah, these are something about the long list, but it gives you, at least covers most of the points, and you can refer. I will send you the link to the 10 Commandments of food, and there are a lot of biblical verses linked to that. It's a Bible reflections, etc.
Manoj, thank you so much. I think, the juxtaposition of the hopelessness one can feel when hearing you talk about the situation and then hearing these 10 commandments of food, it's so empowering, because it's like, oh, I can do that. It's like, I could be mindful. I can reduce waste. I can buy local. So it's so empowering. Thank you. And we will certainly be promoting those 10 commandments of food amongst our members, but also amongst our wider readership. And so thank you so much for that and for contextualizing them for us. I think this leads nicely on to the next thing I wanted to ask you about, which is the Pray and Act Against Hunger campaign, which of course is a collaboration of several groupings, World Council of Churches, Integral Alliance, the World Evangelical Alliance, World Vision, Salvation Army, just to mention a few, Methodist Church, and Micah Global itself. Can you just briefly mention why you think it's important and how we can participate? We are promoting the details of that within Micah, but I'd just love to hear directly from you.
When we are addressing a situation in life, we have to address it in prayer, because we know that things are not under our control. And we acknowledge God, and we acknowledge God of the situation. And when we acknowledge God, we also try to put ourselves into the place where God has put us. So we are acknowledging the stage that God has set. And that prepares us, that helps us to remember our situation, the situation of the world, people who are hungry. So, as an economist once said, if we are one body, and if you have one hand in the water and one hand in fire, you can't say on an average you're fine. It's an economical principle. And so there are no averages in this world, especially we are one body. So if you are, if you are sitting in South Africa, or if you're sitting in Greenland, you're part of this body of believers. And we need to be sensitive. So to know that we understand, read, and we pray, and we act. So what this October 16th is the World Food Day. So nicely fitting into the weekend, we have prepared as many organizations, 80, 90 organizations serving billions of people in the world, to come together to reflect on the situation and to pray and to act. Because as exactly as Deborah, you mentioned, it is not hopeless, because we are people of hope, and we can bring about tremendous change. But of course, change, we have to be the change that we aspire for. And how do we aspire for it? Is when we have the vision of being one community. So it's a very innovative, weekend of prayer. We started off earlier as a church's week of action and prayer. Then we had also a World Day Against Famine, etc. So this is a very good collection. So you should reflect on it, plan for it, and have events and do things together. Because when we do together, then it actually brings about hope. So when you think of a day when you were hungry, or when you need somebody helped you always remember that. So imagine if we all get together and then make a difference. It brings about hope, and courage are two things that we desperately need. in this context. And as followers of Jesus, it's made abundantly clear to us that we need to pray and we need to act.
Thank you so much, Manoj. We are promoting that campaign through our Micah membership. I was sitting in listening to the church service yesterday at my own local church here in Fishhook in Cape Town, and it suddenly occurred to me, I need to be contacting the leadership here in my own local church and helping them to use these resources and being part of it in my own church as much as in the context of Micah Global. So it's one of those areas really that we can incorporate both our personal faith communities and also our vocational communities. So it's a wonderful opportunity for that, and very exciting resources that are being put together to be used. Perhaps in closing, is there any story that you could leave us with, something that will helps us to resonate a little bit more with this topic, this theme of hunger?
Well, I don't know. Well, my ancestors come from Kerala in the southern part of India. And so I was recently very much impressed by one of our newly appointed bishops. He became a bishop in the Church of South India in its Protestant denomination. It's a united church of different traditions from these different Protestant denominations. And his name is Dr. Sabu K. Chirian. So he was a priest who was very interested in agriculture. So, he's son of a farmer. So wherever he went, he made sure that the parsonage, in our tradition, there's a lot of land around the parsonage. This may be different, but anyway, in our context, there used to be land and it's fallow. So he used to, wherever he used to come, he used to convert it into agriculture farm and get the congregation to collectively farm, and the produce is either shared in times of crisis, like in the COVID period, that is shared, and sometimes otherwise they would supply and sell it, and that money is given to the church, etc. So it is amazing. And after he became the bishop, he has done the same. He's gone to his bigger place, but again, he has converted into farming. And the farming is, following agroecological process, intercropping, crop rotation, integrating legumes, using mulch, and, things like that. So, and water conservation and planting of trees, more very much nature-friendly methodology. So as a church leader, he has inspired many people in the congregations to do this, to start using the land that is fallow, doing, backyard kitchen cultivation, etc. So I think it's very important that, these are not beyond our reach. And this really makes a difference. And the other example is again a project from and it's from my friend Norman Tendis. He passed away a couple of years ago. He was actually going to the World Environment Conference in Nairobi, and he died in the plane crash. And he has developed a book of guidelines. Fantastic how congregations can. It's not the 10 Commandments. It's actually walking the talk. It's a roadmap for congregations. So part of it is also about agriculture, energy conservation, and may his memory be blessed. But his wife and his congregation continues the good work. And there are Lutherans in Australia and in Austria, and in there they have a plot of land. And what they've done is that they have made it called a rainbow farm, a farm of hope, like Noah, and they've allotted land allotments to the different congregations. But what they've done is they've also given allotments to refugees who are still waiting for their documents to be processed. So they charge a small amount, but it's a beautiful experience where refugee people who are not allowed to work, they are, along with the congregation members, they have their own plots and they grow these vegetables, they share it, and so beautifully showing that the good Lord has given us this land, this water, and it's so wonderful if we can share the produce. So those are two stories I would like to share with you. And
Well, thank you so much, Manoj. I love both of those stories. They speak to, the local congregation as being that place of life and feeding and capacity and community strengthening. And certainly we can get that second resource from you as well and be promoting that if that's an option.
yes, yes.
Manoj, thank you for this conversation. We're going to go into a time of question and answer within our Micah Connect meeting, but I just want to thank you for your partnership and your ongoing working in fellowship with us. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.